Hi there. My name is Anna Kalingo, and I'm your host for Womb Warmer, a podcast for mothers and mothers in waiting to share their stories from the highs and the lows to the joy and the heartache, and to bring hope, encouragement, and a bit of levity to all you amazing women out there. Or men, if you happen to be listening, we love you too. Today, I am interviewing a dear friend of mine, Rachel De Leon, and she is going to talk about her experience with postpartum and offer some really neat practical tips for people who are perhaps struggling in that time after you have your baby. First, though, we're going to address a couple points. One is an update on my own pregnancy because I haven't given one in a bit. We are in week 33. Little baby Kalingo is healthy with a strong heartbeat, and my stomach is growing appropriately. We have a name. It is Sage Kalea. Sage because, well, Vance and I both like sage, so it was decided. And Kalea means joy in Hawaiian. So Sage Kalea will be arriving early if she's like her mom, late if she's like her dad. And just in God's timing, I am sure. I do not know how much weight I have gained. It's funny, I stopped weighing myself around the age of 23, 24 and have never looked back. So I have no idea how much weight I've gained, but my belly does feel appropriately large for holding a baby. I'm also very grateful that the entire pregnancy has felt very natural and just kind of like it's what my body was built to do. And so I'm super grateful for that. And I will keep you updated on how natural it feels in 7 weeks if she has not come. I'm sure I will be ready for the baby to come out. And then the baby will come out, and then I might be ready for her to go back in. Who knows? But we are very excited. We have a nursery in that we have a room that is painted purple with blackout curtains and a hand-me-down crib from my mother. And because it's from my mother, it is obviously super clean, hardly used, and white, which is Vance's favorite furniture color. So, ideal crib. And my registry is complete. There are so many items that you can register for, and it is mildly overwhelming. Thankfully, I had a few consultants come in and tell me what is necessary and what is not necessary. So, thank you to Leah Darling for that. She spent 2 hours walking me through the Amazon gift list, and I feel like my registry is pretty well built out. Also, the baby industry is a massive one. Now, our nursery is currently occupied by my niece because my sister and her husband and their 2 kids are living with us for the next 5 months. They've come over from New Zealand, so they will be here when little Sage is born, and it's already been very sweet in that Lucy and Eloise, Eloise is 6, Lucy is 4, and they are both very excited about Sage to arrive. And so they kiss my belly goodnight. They give her lots of little huggles, and they get to feel her move, which is super sweet. I joke that the oldest Eloise is an oldest child, and I joke that she may actually tell me how to be a mother after I have the child. So I am fully mentally prepared for that. And I'm very grateful that Julie and them will be here because Lord knows I am not good when I am alone. So there is my update. The other piece I will add before we dive into Rachel's interview is, after doing a couple, we've done about 5 of these episodes, and I've interviewed a few more that we have waiting to be released. And there are 2 takeaways that I have and that seem to be common threads. The first is to trust your instincts, and that if you think something is wrong, something is probably wrong. And it's been an interesting dichotomy for me to hold because at a macro level, I think well, in America, we're over medicated and we're really often looking for maybe a quick fix or something. But on a micro level, particularly in interviewing these women, they are not individuals who are looking for a quick fix, but instead are very in tuned and with their body and with themselves. And so just the importance of one, living a healthy lifestyle, and then within that healthy lifestyle, knowing your body and knowing the rhythms and routines, and then being ready to advocate for yourself when you think that something is wrong, because your intuition, both as an individual but then also as a mother, is likely correct. And then the other theme I have gathered is just the importance of communication with a spouse. And it's interesting, even for me, as someone who got married later in life, in my 30s, I would say I have always considered myself an excellent communicator, both in the workplace, in friendships, with family. But communicating with a spouse is a totally different challenge, and one that does take continual work, and for me has required a level of vulnerability that I've never had to have with anyone else, and that quite frankly is not as natural for me as I thought it should be. And that is not unique. And it's also important to work through that discomfort in communicating with your spouse and have those hard conversations, because otherwise they don't get had and you lose a certain level of intimacy. And I know for myself, every time I have brought up something, telling my husband that I feel like a failure, or I know I failed him, is probably the hardest thing that I have had to do, because I'm not used to failing people. But after those conversations, and we've had a lot over the last few years with a number of transitions, our marriage is always stronger for them and it's never weaker. So those are my two main takeaways from these initial episodes are: one, trust your instincts, and two, communicate well with your husband or partner, even when it is hard. And with that, we will dive into our interview. Thank you. All right. We are here today welcoming Rachel De Leon. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. So a little background on how I know Rachel. She is another wonderful friend from grad school, and we knew each other a bit first year, and then second year we produced, I don't know if I would call it producing, but we're going to call it producing, the grad school Saturday Night Live skit show, which I think was one of my favorite memories for sure in grad school. I think you could probably say the same thing.
100% agree, and you should definitely give us executive production credit.
Yeah. Also, probably what I spent the most time on in grad school, which I did not anticipate. And she is just a lovely human being. So super excited to have you on and talk more about your life and your story.
Thanks. I am super excited.
Okay, great. Well, let's start with a little bit of background. Tell us about life before kids, your career, your husband, your vision of family. I know that's broad, so pick where you want.
It is. It's big. So my husband and I met before I actually went to business school. We did the long distance thing. He helped me make it through the crazy times of business school and get a career in management consulting. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. I think vision of family stems quite a bit earlier. I come from a larger family. I'm one of 4, but my dad comes from a big, good Filipino Catholic family, one of 10. And so my vision of family has always been busy, big, lots of love, people always around, people in and out. And so I think I've always known that I wanted to have a big family. And thankfully, Dylan, my husband, agreed on the big family vision, even though he comes from a smaller family. He knew that it would be fun to have a bit of a horde of children. We're not quite there yet, but making our way there slowly.
I love that. One of 10 is a lot of kids. Now, are all your aunts and uncles in the States? I know you have some in Australia. Are there some in the Philippines still?
They're spread out, mostly in Australia, one in Japan, and then a few in the States. And fortunate that we get to see them every few years or so to catch up. So that's nice. And I think that's something that I've always valued is even though my family has always been a bit spread out, it never felt like we were distant. It always felt really close knit. Everybody was there for you whenever you needed them. And I really appreciated that.
That's great. So, when did you and Dylan decide to have children, and how was the process of getting pregnant and pregnancy?
Yeah, so we were really fortunate with our pregnancy journey. We decided to have kids about a year after being married. And it's funny, I had always said in 5 years, in 5 years, in 5 years about kids. And then one day I woke up and I was like, nope, I'm ready. Like, now is the time. No more 5 years. Stop counting down. And we were really lucky with getting pregnant. We were pregnant within 2 months of trying, which was really fast and kind of forced us to get mentally prepared because we definitely went in being like, this will be a 6 month to a year journey. So very fortunate for that chaos to happen. And yeah, we were very lucky.
That's awesome. What do you think was the catalyst of the switch that was like, let's go?
I think it was two things. It was one, feeling settled in a career, in a relationship, and feeling very secure in who I was, which I don't think I've always had just from like a confidence level. And so that was like a really nice, I think, shift to just walk into. But the other piece was I loved our, just us marriage relationship, but it did feel like something was missing for me. And while we love to travel and all of those things, I knew that there was something more out there that I wanted to add to the relationship. So yeah, I think like literally one day we woke up and we were like, it's time.
Let's do it. I love that. Okay, so switching gears to post-pregnancy, what was your expectation of postpartum versus what was the reality of postpartum for you?
My expectation was I'm really fortunate. I get 5 to 6 months off from work for a postpartum period, which is wonderful, and I'm very fortunate for that. I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is so exciting. I've never had this much time to do quote unquote nothing with this time. I was like, wow, I'll just have this little baby. We'll be in this little baby and we'll just hang out. And I made myself this huge list of things I was going to do in my postpartum period. I was going to work out all the time. I was going to take up pottery. I was going to do a bunch of home projects, do a lot of home cooking, like it was this huge list, no joke. I can send it to you one day. Huge list of like things that I was going to do.
Love
the
that.
reality of postpartum was I think I did none of those things. I was very idealistic about what was going to be possible. And I think I didn't realize for a very long time some of the mental hurdles that I was struggling with in postpartum. And so I just struggled to do a lot of things. Like I struggled to like shower many days. I struggled to leave the house because of anxiety and other things. And I didn't know that that wasn't normal at the time. I thought, oh yeah, everybody must just go through this and nobody talks about it. And you just like one day wake up and you're fine. And that just wasn't true for me at all. And this really was honestly, probably a 12-month postpartum journey for me to rebuild who I was and what I needed to be a normal person. So yeah, pretty night and day on what I was expecting and what actually happened.
Like a lot different. Well, as you walked through it, what were some lessons that you learned?
Yeah. Postpartum, I think, teaches you that you have to have a lot of grace with yourself, because it's really hard to get so caught up in things and feel like you're not doing as much as other people are. And there's so many ways to compare yourself to others these days, social media, even friends, and others that I met through, like I did like a mommy yoga class, like just watching other people in that. There were times that it was really good to see that other people had similar thoughts to you, but there were a lot of times that I felt really alone in the journey that I was going through. I also think a big thing for me was realizing that even if I couldn't perfectly articulate something, that it was okay for me to bring it up to people and highlight it as being a problem and say, hey, I don't 100% know what's wrong, but here's a couple of things of how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And that was hard. And I did not know this. I've learned a lot about anxiety and depression and ADHD and all of these things coming through this postpartum journey. I didn't realize that some of the symptoms of these things were things like not being able to articulate your feelings, to not have words for anything, to not be able to voice frustration or even happiness at times. And I guess just for context, I waited a really long period before I got help. I didn't actually reach out to get help, I think, until I was probably 5 months postpartum is when I first reached out to a therapist. And even then, it was just like, I think something's wrong because my brain doesn't focus great right now. So I'm going to talk to somebody about it. And as I went down that path, I got diagnosed with postpartum anxiety. Throughout this journey, I also got diagnosed with ADHD.
Okay.
Which is crazy that apparently you can get triggered to have ADHD during or after a pregnancy period, because the hormones in your brain change. And so the way your brain works changes, which is just insane. Things that I didn't know. And so all of these things, when somebody actually verbalized to me what was happening, something clicked, right? And I was like, oh my God, that's what's happening to me. That's it, right? And I thought I was being really careful coming into the postpartum period because I struggled with depression before. And so I was paying attention to signs of depression, which are like, thoughts of suicidal, not having any happiness or joy, not feeling love for your child. And I was taking these stupid assessments they make you take at the doctor's office every time you go in to take your baby. I was taking these assessments and I was like, I'm fine because I'm happy. I love my child.
Yeah.
I have no issues there. I'm not having any self-harming thoughts or anything. So I must be fine, right? And whatever's happening in my brain will just like go away on its own. And it's not true. It's not true.
And it wasn't.
A lot of people, it wasn't true at all. And those assessments are crap and don't believe them. Like if you think something is wrong, raise your hand and tell somebody that you think something is wrong and get help earlier. Yeah. I think that was my big learning.
Yeah. I think that's wise. And a general theme I think that I've heard is you know yourself better than other people do at the end of the day. So how was walking through it with the therapist? And are you continuing to go to the therapist, or is there an end in sight of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think first it was very validating, right, to
Mm-hmm.
hear my journey reflected in others,
Yeah.
um, to be able to put names to things that I was feeling, even if others didn't see it, right?
Yeah.
People thought I was fine because I just wasn't saying anything. I
Mm-hmm.
just wouldn't talk about it, right? And I actually was really angry. And I was sad and I was alone and all of these things. And so when I finally started talking about it with a therapist, she helped me put words to it and helped me then be able to articulate it to my husband, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And that was a big thing because I think he knew something wasn't perfect, but he didn't know what it was, right?
Right.
Because there's this new baby that's keeping you up all night, and he didn't know if it was like sleep
You could just be
deprivation.
tired. Yeah.
Totally, right? And he was like, Rachel's just mean sometimes. Maybe she'll get over it. And like he never said this to me, but like as we started talking about it, he was like, "Yeah, like I can see that like you've changed and things are different." And that helped me be able to verbalize more of what was happening and how my brain was working and things that triggered
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, I am still going to a therapist. I switched therapists at some point in time because I did one therapist for a little bit, took a break, and then went through a bit of a difficult period with work and stress and other things, and so started therapy again. Um,
Okay.
I really like my new therapist that kind of helps me prep for this happening again in the future with more kids and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I have personally found it to be very helpful to build a little bit more of the muscle behind how do
Yeah.
I articulate emotions. I found out I have the emotional articulation of like a 10-year-old. And so I have to like use like a color wheel to express my feelings and things, which has been a
It's
wonderful journey.
yeah. But also very useful just in generally communicating with your spouse about anything or communicating with others. But I find it, yes, particularly helpful with your spouse. There are times
Mhm.
Vance will be like, Anna, what you need to tell me. I don't know. I can't.
You're like, I'm angry because I'm frustrated because you did this. Like, that's the level that I have to walk through sometimes just to like force
To
myself into
get
that.
there.
Yeah, to
Uh-huh.
force myself to get there. But it's actually really useful now that I have a toddler to talk
You
him
can
through his
communicate
feelings. Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
becoming really relevant for him where I'm like, are you angry or are you sad? Right? Because we treat those really differently and he doesn't
Uh-huh.
always know, but like one day it will click. We'll get there eventually.
I love that. Um, so let's see. You mentioned the ADHD, and I'm curious if you noticed that more when you went back to work, or if it was pretty prevalent before as well.
I think it was like a hindsight's 2020 kind of thing
Yeah.
where I looked back and I was like, "Oh, obviously." Obviously those are signs of ADHD where I would just constantly misplace things,
Yeah.
couldn't the process of transitioning through anything was really hard for me. Like leaving the house, very hard. Taking a shower is a
Yeah.
transition, very hard. All of those things were signs that I didn't know how to read at the time. It definitely came through in work, um, because going back, I was doing a job that I had done before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why does this feel so much harder this
Yeah.
time than it did 6 months ago? And a lot of it was because I struggled to focus as intensely as I had before. And like a lot of people chalk that up to oh, there's always a portion of your brain now that's focused on your kid, which is true. And I think disregarded some of the challenges that I was facing in the first couple of months being at work. Um, but I've also learned that that's an excuse, right? To
Yes.
not actually figure out if it's something bigger than that. Yes, your
Right.
brain will always think of your child. Like you and your child are so intimately connected, especially if you've carried them and been with them. I mean, I'm sure it's true for people who adopt as well, but like it's always true. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to concentrate on things. Like it's just an
Right.
excuse for that I was using.
um, okay. So in this, you mentioned your therapist. So who has been the most helpful person for you as you've walked through it? Maybe outside of therapy, have you had people that you can confide in?
Yeah, I think my husband's a big one. He's been really great through the journey. Especially as somebody who I think is also like new to therapy and, hasn't really done therapy a ton in his life, that he's been really open to listening to me as I give feedback and things that I'm struggling with and all of that. So that's been great. But outside of that, I think like the two other places that have been great, like my mom is huge, right? And just being able to
Mm-hmm.
bounce things off of her, to cry, to like break down, and to hear her also reflect some of my journey and her journey has been really
Yeah.
helpful. Um, and I'm really appreciative that I can like call her about anything and just tell her when it's hard, right? And she would 100% hop on a plane and come and take care of me and my baby at any
Moms
point
are
in
the
time.
best.
Moms are the best. They really are. And then the other is close friends, right? That I've been able to open up more with about things like this, right? And
Right.
I think here it get validated. People even that I was friendly with before, but then have become closer with through this process to be able to share like this is what's hard for me, and then hear them reflect it and be like, oh my God, I did the same thing where I you know, woke up 6 months into having a child and was like, I think I have depression, and like hear that reflected from people is helpful. It's sad, I think, that so many of us have gone through that experience and hearing how
Yes.
common it is, but it's also validating to know you're not the only one. There's nothing wrong with you if you've gone through this. There's nothing wrong
Of
with your
course.
brain. It is outside of your control. Um, and there's lots of ways that you can get help and support and, you know, come out of it at some point in time. Like there is an end. It doesn't feel like
Yeah.
it sometimes when you're in the moment of when will I be my normal self again. That's what I struggled with a lot of like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a psycho. When will I just be like who I was beforehand? I liked who I
Rachel.
was. It takes a while.
What are some of the tools that you've gathered along the way, I guess? Because I have this lingering cough. As a side note, good thing it
It's
wasn't
like
4 years ago because I would not be able to go anywhere.
it's
But
like a
it's just,
pregnancy thing.
yeah, it's I
Like
don't
the
know if
pregnancy
it's
sinus strip. It's real.
okay. Then I
It's a
can
real thing. It
confirm
sucks.
it is real. I've had it for like 6 weeks, and my brother asked me the other day, "Is this just who you are now, Anna?" Like I, for
Yes,
now,
because my
for
body
now.
makes a lot of fluids right now and it cannot control where those fluids are made.
Anyways, so I will say that the saddest part about it is that I have to censor my laugh sometimes, which makes me sad because I'm not giving people the appropriate gusto I feel like they deserve, you know?
It's okay. I still feel it. I feel the Navs love.
Excellent. Okay, so my question was, what are some of the tools that therapy has given you? Like some of the practical tools. I remember I went to see a therapist for like about a year and a half to work through some stuff, and one of the like silly things that really helped was I would get triggered by someone from work. And every time I'd read an email, I just like my heart rate would go insane. And she was like, Anna, get down and do 10 push-ups and then get back up and like work that out and get back up. So what are some of like the practical tools that you've gotten?
Yeah. I had to like actually really think about this for the first time when I started to have panic attacks through this
Okay.
period, which I've never had before. And my heart goes out to people who struggle with this because it
Yeah.
is a really scary thing to have no control over how your body reacts to something. But through that, I learned a lot. And so, some things that I do now, if I feel like I'm headed into a stressful moment, I remove myself from a situation before I can get too worked up about something. I know it's not always possible, but as much as you can, like go to the bathroom for a second. Running cold water over your wrists is a very calming mechanism.
Okay.
It helps like lower your pulse, which is great. There's a lot of breathing exercises that do now where like you breathe in for 5 seconds, hold your breath for a period of time, breathe out for 5 seconds, hold your breath at the end, that are just like things that force you to pay attention a little bit. I've also like when I feel myself getting worked up over something, I try to focus on like very little details. Like what
Okay.
color is in this room? Like what are all the colors that I can see? And I'll write them down. Like even if I'm in a meeting and I'm getting stressed, like
Interesting.
I'll do that, right? Just to give myself a little bit of a break so that I can reset and also like remind myself that whatever's going on is not that important. And then the other thing that has helped me, I think, a little bit more holistically, I really like two things around being a little bit more mindful. One is trying to practice more gratitude, which I know you're very good at, but trying to take moments, especially when I'm feeling really stressed, to just write down what I'm thankful for. I am not consistent with it. I don't do it every day, but I probably do it a few times a month. And it's just a
Yeah.
helpful reminder for me to stop and calm down and be thankful for all of the things that I have. And then the other thing that's helped is like, honestly, like we started going to church again. And that's been great. Like it's been like a nice
I love
forcing.
that.
I know. It's been a nice like forcing moment in the week, right? It's
Right.
scheduled. It's a moment to stop. It's also what I've found, and I never realized beforehand, because I've had strong opinions about religion. What I never realized that I love about that environment is actually just like being with a lot of other people,
Right.
right? Just sitting there thinking and being with a lot of other people doing the same thing, like is actually a really calming and like community building experience that I think we lose a lot of today. But yeah, that's helped a lot. And Dylan was actually like the forcing mechanism for us to start going back. And I've noticed a huge difference since we have.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, that warms my heart to hear. And I completely agree about the community aspect, especially as you build a family too, right? It's just really nice to be around other people that are at least working toward a similar end as you are. So that's awesome. And also love gratitude. Okay, so switching gears a bit just to career. So, how have you and your husband navigated your career and motherhood and fatherhood and the balance that is? Because I know it's a huge balance.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. There are times that I think we've got it handled, and then something changes, and we're like, "Oh, start from scratch again." Honestly, I
Now,
think we've been really.
does Theo right now, does he go to daycare?
So he goes to daycare. We were lucky that we had a nanny for the first year that I went back to work, and then he went to daycare just recently,
Okay.
about 4 months ago. So I think that worked for us. We needed a nanny to start with. I personally needed the nanny because I, like, in struggling with anxiety, a big part of that was struggling with logistics of things, and
That makes
having a
sense.
nanny drastically reduced the logistics for me, right? I didn't have to pack
Yes.
lunch. I didn't have to worry about feeding him. There was somebody there that would take care of him. Just the basics. Like, I didn't have to do laundry. Like, that stuff was taken
That's
care of, and
huge.
that was really important for me. As much as, like, it was important for us to find somebody who, like, took great care of him, I also just needed somebody to, like, manage the other challenging aspects of, like, being a parent for me for a little bit. And so that was great. We then knew, like, Theo's a pretty social kid, and he was ready to be in an environment where he was more challenged and surrounded by other kids. And so we knew it was time for him to go to daycare. The transition is hard for anybody who goes through that. They know it's hard. He was pretty good. It only took him about a week to really, like, figure it out and be interested in going, right, and not have total meltdowns every time. And now it's great. But even through doing that, we realized that that wasn't enough, and we actually did still need the logistical help. So we ended up getting a part-time nanny to help us in the morning.
Okay.
Because mornings are the most chaotic time. Yeah. Trying to get a kid out who doesn't want to be rushed, and you're trying to get to work and all the things. So we were able to get a part-time nanny who, she comes 3 days a week and helps us through, like, kind of the chunkiest part of the week, gets him ready for school, makes his breakfast, takes him to school, does some things around the house for us. Absolutely much needed. It gets trickier because we both travel occasionally for work. And so we've had to be creative about how do you fill in the gaps, right, when that happens. And there's been times that, like, we've had a babysitter come and, you know, stay later with Theo and put him to bed if one of us has to work later and we're the only one there during the week. We're also really lucky that we haven't had to pull this trigger yet, but it's a nice safety net to have. Of my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live in Houston with us. And so if anything was to happen, I know that we have backup in the city, which is nice and not always the case for everybody.
Yeah. Having some family around is really nice.
Yeah. Honestly, like, family's huge. And then just the amount of times that, like, Theo's gotten sick and had to be home for a week, Nanny's been sick and had to be out for a week, whatever. Those are, like, the chaotic periods where you try to figure out how to cover. And sometimes we've called in grandparent backup. Other times, like, Dylan and I just try to figure out how to trade off in a day. It's not easy. It takes so much communication to make it work, more than we probably were comfortable with initially. We were very much like, I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to assume that you know what I mean or what I need household. And that does not work anymore.
And that doesn't, it's not effective.
Not at all. Not at all. So a lot more communication.
A good forcing mechanism for that.
It is. It is. And I don't know. We don't have it figured out. When we throw a second nugget into the mix, I can only imagine it's going to get more challenging. But people do it. That's what I keep reminding myself of. We're not the first one. So you got to figure it out.
Millions of people have done it before you. They're going to do it after you.
That's what I told myself when I was going through birth. Millions of women have done this. You can figure it out.
It'll be okay. Well, and you mentioned traveling earlier, and right now I sometimes think that Vance thinks that, like, our traveling days are over after we have a child, and I'm like, I don't think they have to be totally over. So you have gone on many trips with Theo, correct?
Many trips with Theo. Some better than others.
Yeah, with varying levels of success, and of course it's different. But is he a little adventurer?
He does great. I will say there are times to travel with kids and there are times not to travel. 18 months, terrible time to travel. They are absolute gremlins. Do not take them anywhere.
A lot of movement.
Lot of movement. Found their voice. new level of screaming, bad combination.
But
for
also
planes.
can't really articulate anything yet. So yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah. Yeah. But honestly, like, I think it's really overwhelming to travel with kids when they're little, but they're so easy. Like 3 months to a year, they're so easy. You just like give them a bottle, they're fine, right? They're like happy little
They're
nuggets.
chill.
Yeah, chill. They pretty much just need to like eat and sleep. So they're willing to do whatever you want to do, and you're not really on their schedule yet. So I would highly recommend, if people can, travel early so you get through like the scary bits. Because if the first time you travel with them is when they're already kind of in gremlin stage, like you're not going to want to do it again.
Then you're done. That's a good piece of advice. All right. So final question. What in this experience are you most grateful for? And then what would you encourage your listeners with?
I wish I had prepared for this because it is a good question. I am most grateful for, I think, finding connections in unexpected places and finding people who are really open to your experience, who are really understanding and empathetic with what you're going through. And like,
I love that.
Toddlers are great. They teach you so much. Even in their tantrums, there's times that I have to just laugh because like whatever they're breaking down about is just funny. And it's the biggest, most important thing in their life in that moment.
It is, right.
And so you have to have empathy for what they're going through. But it's funny, it's refreshing. It, I think, reminds you what actually matters in life, you know?
Definitely.
Even in the most stressful moments of my job, I can look at Theo and he's a happy guy and playing with rocks outside, and I'm like, that's it. That's what matters. Whatever else is going on is not that important. And then what would I encourage listeners with? I mean, I think the theme is, if you think that something is wrong, if you think that you feel off, even just slightly off, ask for help, right?
Right.
And I think I went in idealistically to my postpartum experience, and I should have been more prepared than I was, especially knowing that I came from a history of depression and other things. I would say if you do have any of that in your history, you are at a higher disposed rate of experiencing some sort of postpartum something. Set up your support systems now, right? Have a way that friends know how to reach out to you and ask you the right question to get you to open up to them. Set up therapists, set up all of the things that you need, because in the moment it's really hard to ask for help if that mechanism doesn't exist.
All right. Well, Rachel, it was absolutely wonderful talking to you as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. Lovely to be here.
Yep. Bye.